from Cross River State is Minister Designate Senator John Owaneno, who was born on the 4th day of June in 1966.
President Bola Tinubu on August the 16th, 2023 appointed Senator John Eno as the 36th Minister of Sports Development, setting the tone for development in sports under his administration. Shortly after assuming office, the minister undertook an inspection of the facilities at the Moshood Abiola National Stadium, Abuja. He followed that with a tour of the dilapidated National Stadium in Surulere, Lagos, to assess the level of decay at the once glamorous edifice.
Our sports needs a serious re-engineering. Before now, our sports, we were ranked the 5th best in the world. But what position are we? In football, in athletics, in boxing, we're down there. So my advice to the Honorable Minister, this is what I expect of him. Thank God he has come to speak his mind. Thank God he's ready to listen. But he should bring to himself those people who are genuinely committed to the development of sports around him.
Aside sports administration, there were key sporting moments in 2023. The Super Falcons of Nigeria bowed out of the FIFA Women's World Cup, co-hosted by Australia and New Zealand in the round of 16. The national under-20 team, the Flying Eagles, bowed out of the FIFA Under-20 Men's World Cup in Argentina in the quarterfinals. Toby Amushon came short in her quest to retain the 100-meter hurdles title at the World Athletics Championships in Budapest, Hungary, finishing 6th in the final. The D-Tigress affirmed their dominance in Africa after they won the FIBA Women's Afrobasket crown for a 4th consecutive time. Nigeria became the biggest winners in the CAF Awards, winning the Men and Women Player of the Year awards, the Goalkeeper of the Year, and Women Team of the Year. And 2024 appears set to get even more engaging for the nation on the international scene, as it presents a unique task for sports in Nigeria, with the Africa Cup of Nations in Cote d'Ivoire this month, the African Games in Ghana in March, the Olympic Games in Paris come July, and the Women's Africa Cup of Nations holding in Morocco, among others, all lined up.
Even the Bible says that if the foundation is destroyed, what can the righteous do? In many of our sports federations, in many of our sports institutions, we don't have foundational structures. We just do things haphazardly. That's why today you record one success and then 10 years down the line you can't even build on that success because the foundation is not in place. So in that regard, Nigerian sports industry policy, it's in place now. The next step is how are we going to ensure that we begin to implement what that policy says.
We have new people at the ends of our affairs, and we have a president that is asking for scorecards. Presidents that want to know what you're doing. So I expect that our minister will do better than those that we've had before. And 2023 had been a very slow year for sports. 2024 should be a year where everything will bloom. It's a year of many international competitions, and I'm sure Nigeria will not be found wanting.
The first big test for Nigeria in 2024 is Africa's biggest football competition, the AFCON, where 3-time African champions, the Super Eagles, aim to end a 10-year wait for the African title. Will this dream become a reality? More on the country's sports outlook for this year. We are now being joined by sports management consultant, Mr. Yomi Kuku, right here in our Lagos studio. Good evening. Thank you for joining us on the news at 10.
Happy New Year.
Absolutely. Happy New
It's
Year.
been a whole year.
It has been. We had this conversation last year.
Absolutely, yeah.
You know, I'm tempted to ask, has anything changed? But 2024 obviously will be a very busy year for Nigeria sports-wise, starting from tomorrow with the AFCON, which is already underway with the opening match right now. But let's talk about the administration of sports. What should government administrators, those who have a say in that sector, what must they do differently this year to avoid disappointment?
Well, I think everybody seems to be getting used to all this disappointment here and there. But one thing you can take away from the fact that for sports administration, we're making some remarkable progress. And what I mean by that is that there's some form of stability in that sector. You'll recall that President Muhammadu Buhari, the former president, had like 2 ministers for 2 cycles, election cycles, and from Mr. Dalong to Mr. Sunday Dare.
Yeah.
So hopefully, if we can continue to have that, that is one improvement we have come to understand. Now, the other thing that we now need to do is to focus on the basics, which is the fundamental of picking the different sectors in the management of sports in Nigeria and then extending it to athlete performance and getting them the desired results and giving some of these administrators deliverables. But then again, we have also a new administration. So hopefully, President Bola Tinubu will retain the current sports minister for the next 4 years. And then I'm also hoping that the people around him will also guide him very right. Because there seems to be a cycle of vengeance and revenge on the part of people that surrounds the Honorable Sports Minister's office. We experienced that in 2015. We had that in 2019. And you will recall that despite the fact that towards the end of the tenure of Mr. Sunday Dare, where he was able to focus on directing a sports policy for Nigeria that would have helped this current incoming, the current one that we have no longer incoming, but I'm not sure whether that has really passed on within the fraternity of the Federal Sports Development Ministry itself. Right. So, but if we're able to get that on, that is one step forward. It doesn't mean that everything should be taken hook, line, and sinker. They may have to do some reviews and bring in some other experts who can actually work on it.
Now, let's talk about sports infrastructure. I know there's a lot to talk about, but we need to touch on infrastructure, which remains a major challenge. If we would do anything differently this year, what will that be for you regarding infrastructure?
Well, I think the bottom line is first to revive the National Stadium in Lagos. It's basically turned into a den of rodents and all that.
Is this for like the 1 millionth time, literally speaking?
Well, we said at that time that was a wrong decision by the former sports minister, and people felt that we're just being antagonistic. You needed to have a plan before you go on certain things. And if you ask me, we already have quite a number of football stadiums all over Nigeria. Everybody focusing on football. From the BVN statistics that we have now, we're talking about more than 100 million people. So the viability of 20 million people getting into sports, either as elite or recreational, it's really very high. Job creation and all that. Yeah. Thankfully, if you look at what the current administration is doing in job creation, especially in the creative industry, which should include sports, that is an opportunity for us to be able to build on the infrastructure you're talking about. So the National Stadium should be the first target. They could convert the National Stadium into simply an athletics, performance center without having to get in the football. Convert the pitch itself into field events, right, and then the tracks, revive them, and reduce the stands as well. You can reduce and pull some sides of the spectator stands down and then make it available for other purposes itself. Right. There is the indoor sports hall and many other things, around infrastructure. So
and naturally this ties to the conversation around funding. We could talk about infrastructure for as long as possible, but funding is at the heart of it. So let me see if I can tie this to our final question. Okay. What would you say should be the major focus for government this year? If we could just wind it down in less than a minute. Maybe funding will play a major role, but what should be that major focus?
Well, I think there's funding now. You're saving a lot from the fuel subsidy. So extend it to
sports is eyeing that as well?
Yes, exactly, because you want to work with a very strong restive youth problem. True. And then you need to attract sports into that. Nigerians, young people, they have that physical attributes, so convert that into it. And then focus a lot. I think this current sports minister should please, in his wisdom, do a very intense research on reviving the National Institute for Sports. That is the bedrock. When you miss that, believe me, there is nowhere we're going. The best times of Nigerian sports was through the NIS. True. So they need to revive that part. Okay. And then outside of the infrastructure you mentioned. And then the sports minister's office should compose of a very strong, small working group. Right. And then reduce the number of sports we are participating for now, for developmental purposes, and then achieving results in the next 4 years.
Quickly, your prediction for AFCON, Super Eagles.
AFCON. Let's go there and enjoy the game.
Mr. Yomi Kuku, sports management consultant, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much for the once in a year, meeting.
Okay, yeah. I like that. Yeah. Thank you.